Mic check, mic check. What's going on? Welcome back to another hip hop snapshot. I'm your host, Ross Martinez, and we continue our 5-episode arc of culture meets commercial success, hip hop's identity crisis. Today, it's going to be a good one because I work in radio. We're going to talk about Rawkus Records versus radio play when the underground roared at the ivory tower. Without further ado, grab that milk crate, take a seat. It's time to talk hip hop history. This snapshot is for the hip hop heads, for the ones who stayed after class, who rewound the bars just to catch that slick ass metaphor. Have you ever wondered what the culture might have sounded like if the charts reflected hip hop and not just what was marketable or what was selling? If airwaves weren't just about catchy bars, but lyrics that actually moved people on the inside. Let's rewind to the late 90s, when shiny suits ruled the charts and a quiet rebellion was writing its manifesto in the margins. Rawkus Records. It wasn't built for radio play. It wasn't chasing charts by any means. It was chasing the truth of what hip-hop stood for. Founded in 1995 by Brian Brader and Jared Meyer and funded by one James Murdoch. A twist that still makes some hip-hop heads raise their eyebrow. Look into that. Rawkus Record had a mission. Restore the pen, reclaim the message, and respect the culture. And they weren't just signing anybody. They were building a resistance of real MCs. Talib Kweli, Mos Def, Black Star, Company Flow, Pharoah Monch, High Tech. The list goes on. Projects like Sound Bombing and Lyricist Lounge weren't just albums. They were scripture to hip-hop heads. Mixtapes for the soul, have you. Blueprints for balance in a time when the mainstream was tipping towards more spectacle and not as much substance. Rawkus Records wasn't asking for a seat at the table on the mainstream. They were building their own branch of it. While radio rotated the same 10 hits every hour, and it does that for a reason. I've been in radio since 2014. It's what we do. Rawkus Records was out here crafting verses like essays. They didn't compromise, they composed. Every bar was intentional. Every beat felt dug up and not manufactured. It had a soul to it. The album Black on Both Sides by Mos Def, it was more than just an album. It was a syllabus. Train of Thought by Reflection Eternal felt like jazz and protest made love on wax. And Pharoah Monch Simon Says, that was the rare shot at crossover fame. From being a backpack hip-hop kid to making it the mainstream, that was the opportunity. But a Godzilla sample pulled it back to the shadows. Sampling violations, the thorn in the side of hip-hop. Shout out to De La Soul. They were this close to cracking through. This close. But every time they knocked on the door and they thought they had the right keys, the industry changed the locks on them. And let's be honest here. Rawkus had bars. They had talent. They had the beats. They had the vision. But what they lacked was the one key fundamental that even nowadays the conscious side of hip-hop doesn't have, is access. Radio wasn't interested in rappers who made you pause and think. Program directors weren't checking for syllables. They were checking more for sing-alongs and what was marketable. Music like this is too smart, too radical, and unfortunately, what they failed to tell you, too black. And we're not just talking about skin tone, we're talking about intellect, rebellion, and honesty. For some reason in marketability, those aren't the characteristics that people in positions of power really go after. And as a minority man, I got to be honest with you, I'm in that position and I fight it all the time. And it's always interesting to me why that being too quote unquote urban is a bad thing. Unless it's the urban they like. Think about that for a second. But in this moment, being challenged with this, right? Rawkus Records, they didn't fold. They pivoted from this. So instead of going towards the mainstream and the program directors and radio and all this blah, 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 they went the college circuits. They spoke to backpackers, flooded the underground with something major labels couldn't fake, even though they tried. Substance. They didn't need the gatekeepers. They built their own gates and opened them wide for the talented and the conscious. Rawkus Records didn't just release music, they rewrote the rules for independent survival. Before Bandcamp, before SoundCloud, before playlists decided your worth, there was Rawkus Records. And if you hear a rapper today with a sharp pen and no major label attached to him, that's the ripple effect of Rawkus Records' influence in hip-hop. Think about artists like Joey Badass, Rhapsody, J. Cole, Little Sims. They're not just influenced by Rawkus Records, they are extensions of the spirit of independence. Rawkus didn't change sound, it changed strategy. It proved that hip-hop didn't have to beg for inclusion. It could build its own altar and preach from it, all in the same breath. So here's your takeaway in this snapshot. This isn't underground versus mainstream. It's deeper than that. It's intention versus industry, message versus marketing, soul versus spin. Rawkus Records asked a question that we still, in 2025, haven't answered. What happens when the truth isn't profitable? What happens when the dopest MCs and rhymes don't fit the corporate playlist? Can the culture survive without being sold? Or is visibility the new validation? Because here's the deep, honest truth that nobody wants to say out loud. If the gatekeepers can't understand the language of the people, maybe it's time we stop knocking at those doors and start building our own houses. All right. Without further ado, there's been another episode of Hip Hop Snapshots. I'm your host, Ross Martinez, and until next time, stay sharp, stay grounded, soul first, and above everything, be hip hop. I'm out. Peace.